in which our protagonists, Anna and Levine, finally meet, and in which one of their tales comes to an end. Chapter 18. Now there's another matter, and you know which one. About Anna, said Stepan Arkadyevich after pausing briefly to shake off the unpleasant expression. The moment Oblonsky pronounced Anna's name, Alexei Alexandrovich's face changed completely. Instead of the former animation, it expressed fatigue and deadness. What, in fact, do you want from me, sir? He said, turning in his chair and snapping shut his pince-nez. A decision, some sort of decision, Alexei Alexandrovich. I'm addressing you now, Stepan Arkadyevich was going to say, not as an offended husband, but for fear of thereby ruining everything, he replaced the phrase, not as a statesman, which came out inappropriately, but simply as a man, a good man and a Christian. You must take pity on her, he said. But for what, in fact? Karenina said softly. Yes, take pity on her, if you had seen her as I have. I've spent the whole winter with her. You would take pity on her. Her situation is awful, simply awful. It seems to me, Alexei Alexandrovich replied in a higher, almost shrieking voice, that Anna Arkadyevna has everything she herself wanted. Ah, Alexei Alexandrovich, for God's sake, let's not have any recriminations. What's past is past, and you know what she wishes and is waiting for. A divorce. But I took it that Anna Arkadyevna renounced divorce in case I demanded a pledge that our son be left with me. I replied in that sense and thought the matter was ended, and I consider that it is ended, Alexei Alexandrovich shrieked. For God's sake, don't get angry, said Stepan Arkadyevich, touching his brother-in-law's knee. The matter is not ended. If you will allow me to recapitulate, the matter stood like this. When you parted, you were great. You could not have been more magnanimous. You granted her everything, freedom, and even a divorce. She appreciated that. Don't think she didn't. She precisely appreciated it. So much so that in those first moments, feeling herself guilty before you, she did not and could not think it all over. She renounced everything, but reality and time have shown her that her situation is tormenting and impossible. Anna Arkadyevna's life cannot interest me, Alexei Alexandrovich interrupted, raising his eyebrows. Allow me not to believe that, Stepan Arkadyevich objected softly. Her situation is tormenting to her, and that without the slightest profit to anyone. She has deserved it, you'll say. She knows that, and asked nothing of you. She says directly that she dares not ask anything. But I, and all the family, all those who love her, beseech you, why must she suffer? Who is the better for it? Excuse me, sir, but you seem to be putting me in the position of the accused, said Alexei Alexandrovich. No, not at all. Do understand me, said Stepan Arkadyevich, touching his hand as if he were sure that this touching would soften his brother-in-law. I'm saying only one thing. Her situation is tormenting, and you can relieve it. And you won't lose anything. I'll arrange it all for you so that you won't even notice. You did promise. The promise was given earlier, and I thought that the question of our son had settled the matter. Besides, I hoped that Anna Arkadyevna would be magnanimous enough. Pale, his lips trembling, Alexei Alexandrovich barely got the words out. She leaves it all to your magnanimity. She begs, she beseeches you for one thing, to bring her out of the impossible situation in which she finds herself. She no longer asks to have the boy. Alexei Alexandrovitch, you are a kind man. Put yourself in her situation for a moment. The question of divorce, in her situation, is for her a question of life and death. If you hadn't given your promise earlier, she would have reconciled herself to her situation. She would be living in the country, but you promised. She wrote to you and moved to Moscow, and now, for 6 months, she's been living in Moscow, where every meeting is like a stab in the heart, waiting each day for the decision to come. It's like keeping a man condemned to death for months with a noose around his neck, promising him maybe death, maybe mercy. Take pity on her, and then I undertake to arrange everything so that vos scrupules. I'm not speaking of that, not of that, Alexei Alexandrovitch interrupted squeamishly. But I may have promised what I had no right to promise. So you refuse what you promised? I have never refused to do what was possible, but I would like to have time to consider how far what was promised is possible. No, Alexei Alexandrovitch, Oblonsky said, jumping up. I won't believe it. She is as unhappy as a woman can be, and you can't deny her such a... How far what was promised is possible? Us povercer detre un libre pensur. But I, as a believer, cannot act contrary to the Christian law in such an important matter. But in Christian societies, and even in ours, as far as I know, divorce is permitted, said Stepan Arkadyevich. Divorce is also permitted by our church, and we see... Permitted, but not in this sense. Alexei Alexandrovitch, I don't recognize you, Oblonsky said after a silence. Wasn't it you, and didn't we all appreciate it, who forgave everything and moved precisely by Christian feeling, were ready to sacrifice everything? You yourself talked about giving a kaftan when your shirt was taken, and now... I beg you, sir, Alexei Alexandrovitch said, pale and with a trembling jaw and a squeaky voice, suddenly getting to his feet. I beg you to stop this conversation. Oh, no. Well, forgive me if I've upset you, Stepan Arkadyevich said, smiling abashedly and holding out his hand. But in any case, as an ambassador, I have merely conveyed my message. Alexei Alexandrovitch gave him his hand, reflected a little, and said, I must think it over and look for guidance. I'll give you a decisive answer the day after tomorrow, he added, having thought of something. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.